exception handling in Python. Hello, this is Tushar from codewithtk.net. So let's move on. Let me open a new Jupyter notebook. I'll click on new Python 3. Let me rename it as exception. So the thing is, what is exception? So let's say you are just learning a new programming language and you don't know the syntax. You're just typing something and you're trying to run something, but you see sometimes you get nasty error message, okay, that you didn't do this like that. For example, I just type A. Okay, let's say I just type A and try to execute. You see, Python gave me a nasty error message that, okay, name array is not defined. So these are exceptions. Okay, so there are many types of exception. We're going to discuss about all of them or many of them in this video. But the thing is, okay, then what is exception handling? Now let's say sometimes exception might occur intentionally, sometimes it might occur unintentionally. Let's say sometimes exception might occur due to some data and where you don't have any control on the data. If certain data is appearing, there is exception. So what you want to do is, instead of seeing this type of error message, let's say you want to handle it. So what happens is, let's say I have a multiple line. Okay, let's say I have 2 lines of code. I have first line A and next line is I want to say print something, print A. Okay, but because there is an exception in line number 1, so it's not executing the line number 2. So what if, let's say you don't know whether first line may cause error or may not cause error, but you still want to proceed to next line. How can you do that? That's where the exception handling come into picture. So exception handling allows you to handle the situations like that so that you can still proceed to the next line. Or there are many other scenarios. Yeah, this is just to give you the basic idea about exception handling. Now, how can I handle this situation? Let's say, okay, let's say I want to execute line 1. If line 1 failed, then I still want to execute line number 2. How can we do it? The way we can do it is just type something like try. Okay, so try this first line. Then you have to do except. Okay, so this is except keyword. Except you can define a specific error. I'm coming to that. But what you can do now in the exception handling, let's say you want to print exception occurred. Now if I just try to run this, you see it says exception occurred and then it printed A. Let's say I want to print something else, my name. Okay, so it is printing. Optionally, so whatever you want to do, if you want to execute multiple lines here, you can do it here in this block. Okay, so it's up to you. So what do you want to do, how you want to handle the exception? So this part is called, you can call it as exception handling. However, in this case, let's say this is, you see this particular thing, it says name error colon. So this is the key of the exception. So this is the type of exception is throwing. So instead of just except, this is for the generic exception. If you want to catch the specific exception, you can do it like that. Okay, you can say except name error, because we know this is name error and we can still capture it. See, it's still we are able to capture it. But there are many other types of exception. For example, if you did not catch it rightly, there are other type of exception. For example, I want to add, say, a text with a number. Okay, you see there is another type of exception. This is type error, because number 2 with string you cannot add it just like that. You have to convert it to string like that. If you do it, then it should work. Okay, but without that, it will give you error. Now let's say by mistake you gave, instead of name error, you gave type error. What would happen? You'll still see this nasty error because you did not catch this particular exception. So alternatively, what you can do, you can have another block. Let's say this is for the specific error and this is for the generic error. Okay, this is for the generic error. Let's say I say type exception occurred and I say print something gone wrong. Something is wrong. Now see, it has printed something is wrong because it is not giving you type error, it is giving you named error. Okay, if you want to catch the type error, what you can do, you can just type like my previous example, say Tushar plus some numbers. Okay, so this is the type exception occurred. Now there are let's try to create few of the different type of exceptions. Okay, so now we have already created something called type error. Okay, so we have created type error. Okay, then we have also created named error. Now let's say yeah, if I want to do it like this, okay, if I want to divide something by 0, you know, that's the error. It says divide 0 division error. So the specific type of error is called 0 division error. This is how we can create 0 division error. Now if you want to try more, let's say I just want to print something, but you know, let's say I forgot to close the quote, okay, after my name. What would happen? See, it's giving you something called syntax error. Okay, so there is syntax error. Now let's say I have a list. Okay, I have a list. I just assigned a list and I just created an empty list. I forgot to assign any value into it. And now let's say I want to access the content of this list. As you can imagine, it should give you some error because there's no element in it, but I'm still trying to access the first element. You see, it's giving you some index error. It says list index out of range. So now let's say I have another dictionary. Okay, let's say my dictionary is equal to, let's say I have created a new dictionary, just like that. Okay, now my dictionary do not have any key or any value. Now let's say if I try to access something, some key, okay, it will give you error, and that is called key error. You see, we are able to find index error, key error, then we found named error, syntax error, divide by 0 error. Okay, now let's say I'm trying to run a for loop. Okay, let's say while true. Okay, while true, and let's say I want to increment one variable I. Okay, I've just assigned I is equal to 0, and inside true I say I is equal to I plus 1. So if I run it, you know, it will keep on incrementing I, and there is a true, that means there's no condition to break. Now let's say by mistake I just started executing it, and then I realize that it's going to run forever. So what I can do, I can just stop this kernel. I can stop this, interrupt this kernel. I can click on this, hit on this one. Now you see it says keyboard interrupt. So this is another type of error called keyboard interrupt. Okay. Now there's other type of error includes like runtime error. Okay, we can create a runtime error just with a simple example. Let's say I have a recursive function. Okay, I have a function. I'm defining a function, and inside that function I'm just calling that function again. Okay, just calling that function. So yeah, I'm just calling recursive and without any condition, without any break condition. If I just call function, okay, what would happen? It will just keep calling itself. Okay, and let's say what happens with that process. So as you can see, this is recursion error, maximum recursion depth exceeded. So recursion cannot be indefinite or infinite. So until after certain limit, there is a maximum depth. If you cross it, then it will throw error. But interestingly, it has given you a new type of error. Okay, before I move on, I just want to have a quickly look at that what are the different type of error and exception available in Python. You might be wondering, okay, I have shown you multiple examples. I've shown you the example of divide by 0, syntax, named error, type error, index error. How many types of error are there? Okay, what is the list? Where can I get the exhaustive list of it? To get that, yeah, let's look into the Python documentation. So I just simpler version of the Python documentation. If you look at that, okay, let me zoom in. So there is something called base exception. Okay, every exception. So by default we are catching this exception. We are calling this exception. So this exception is inherited. Exception is a class. We'll learn about class in the next lecture. But for now, understand that class is an object and it has a hierarchy. For example, animal could be a class and the dog could be a subclass of animal, something like that. Similarly, for all exception is inherited from something called base exception. Under base exception, okay, under base exception, you have only these 4 things. You have system exit, keyboard interrupt, which we have just shown, okay, generator exit, and then exception. These are the 4 children base exception. Now if you just open exception, these are the children of exception. Okay, let me close all of them so that we can see it better. Okay, now under exception you see there are arithmetic error, stop iteration, arithmetic error, assertion error, buffer error, import error. So we can do the import error. Let's say you want to import any package which does not exist, so you will get import error. Lookup error we have already seen. Index error and key error, we have already seen how to create the index error lesson. One list you are trying to access an element which does not exist, that will give you an index error. Key error is the error which you're trying to access a key in the dictionary, that will give you key error. Then there are memory error. Let's say you are trying to load too much into in a memory. You're trying to read a 1 GB file, or say 10 GB file where your memory is 8 GB, and if you want to read everything at once, you'll get memory error. Name error, I think we have seen name error. Let's say I was just trying to access a variable a which does not exist, and that will give you a name error. Then we have OS error, we have runtime error. We have already seen some type of runtime error. The recursive error is a runtime error. Yeah, you see, recursive error is part of runtime error. We have already created it. Now syntax error we have already created. Let's say you missed a code, that will give you syntax error. The type error, we have already seen type error. Basically we try to print some string plus a integer, that will give you a type error. And of course there are other value error and warning. Yeah, I'm not going to cover all of them, but you get the idea. These are the detailed exhaustive list. There is a Python documentation, built-in exception. Let me pull up that pages, you can see it for yourself. So yeah, in the documentation page, this page, you can see all this exception list here, whatever we have just seen. Okay, moving on. Now we want to see how to handle this exception. What are the different examples of handling it? A part of it we have already seen. Let's say these are specific error. Now I can go on, I can have another block for named exception. I can have another block for name error, just like that. Okay, I can go on. So this is the way of creating multiple blocks. Now you can even nest it. Let's say inside this I have another line. Let's say print hi, but I just created another exception block inside it. Okay, so you have to indent it. There is the exception. Let's say I do pass. So you can nest exception. There could be, and it's up to you. You can choose only one line to try. You can choose multiple lines to try. That depending on your situation, depending on your requirement, you can do it. Okay. Now moving on, you can also have your custom exception. For example, I want to create a specific exception, specific business exception. Okay, let's say you want to create a certain situation. Let's say you have a inventory, you are running some retail business, and let's say you want to give an error or the warning error when the stock is below, say 10. Okay, below a fixed number 10. Then you can create a new exception. Okay, so and in order to create a new exception, let's say I name my new exception. You have to define a class. So define a class, let's say my exception. Okay, I define a class called my exception. Now my exception, it should inherit the exception class. We'll discuss about this inheritance in our next lecture, but let's just continue. So here actually you can create a new you can just keep it like that if you want to, but no, you have to do at least a simple command called pass. Okay, now let's say I want to also create a variable. Okay, in my exception, now what you can do, let's say you have a situation, let's say inventory, let's say I have inventory is a variable called 10. Now I have a condition, if inventory less than, let's say less than 20, then you call this as raise my exception. Okay, so you see you got a my exception here. Okay, now here again you can just do something like try, and you can handle. So instead of built-in exception, you can catch here your specific exception, and you can just print something. Let's say inventory is very low. So you see, you are able to catch your specific exception. So this is about the specific exception. And you can also do something like exception chaining. Let's say you have a function, okay, my function. Let's say I have a function, or I'll say my function. Inside my function, I'm throwing an error. I'm raising an error. Okay, I'm just raising, let's say, name error. Raising a name error. Now, when I'm calling this function, I can basically create another exception from this exception. Okay, the way to do it is I can just create something like try. Let's say I'm calling my function. Inside my function, I'm just saying that except, let's say, except name error as exception. Then I'm just raising a new error. Let's say I raise a new runtime error. I'm just saying that named error occurred from exception, from my custom exception. So this is how I'm just chaining exception, because here I'm raising a name error, then I'm catching name error as exception, then I'm saying raise runtime error from this. So this is how I'm chaining from named error to a runtime error. So if I just run this, okay, now you see what it is telling. It's telling that raise name error, the above exception was direct cause of the following exception, runtime error. So basically I'm just creating a name error, then from the name error I'm creating another runtime error. So this is called the exception chaining. I think that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you like my video, please hit the like button, and please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that anytime I upload something, you'll get an instant notification. Thanks again for watching.